Hello and welcome back to Mike Reads the World. Today we're going to be discussing Gioconda Belli's La Mujer Habitada, or Inhabited Woman, in English. I read it in Spanish, but it's very easy to find in English, and while I don't know anything about that translation, the writing is very direct and written in a way that, from my experience, will translate very well to English and probably a lot of other languages. It's actually available in 11 languages. So this book is for Nicaragua. Gioconda Belli, this was her first novel, and it's based on her own experiences of participating in the Sandinista rebellions of Nicaragua and kind of the leftist movements that were against the dictatorship there. So the country in this story is kind of a stand-in for Nicaragua. It's not actually Nicaragua, but I think it's called Faguas, and it's really clearly it's supposed to represent Nicaragua and the political situation there. Now, this was written in 1988, so a lot has happened and a lot has changed with, from what I can tell. I'm not going to talk about that because I'm not that well informed, but I do know that this movement now is kind of like has in some way come to power in this country, or come back to power because it came to power then was removed, and there's been sort of this back and forth between your right-wing dictatorships and then this like leftist movement kind of coming in and out, and that's really all I can say about it. But that aside, how good's the book? I want to start right away by saying the ending was amazing. I'm not going to spoil like anything about it, and at least the ending. I'm just going to give you kind of the basic. I'm going to make this review try to be as appealing for both people that have read the book and not, like talk about some of the ideas brought up in it. But yeah, just for people who have not read it, based on the author's experience, she's basically of, it kind of sounds like Italian descent, but she's from the upper class of this Central American country, and she studied abroad. Now she's working as an architect. She's kind of got everything in place to follow her dreams, become an architect, become a self-sufficient woman, and sort of uh, she develops this relationship with another architect at her office, and it turns out this architect is part of this movement. He is really involved with this underground movement that's trying to subvert and overthrow really the dictatorship, and it is motivated by indigenous and leftist ideas. And in the meantime, there's also these, in italics, kind of narrated dream, not dream sequences, but kind of narrations or memories, and like a narration of the spirit of an Aztec woman. I assume it's Aztec just by the names and the language and the words that they're using. Um, and this Aztec woman's spirit, uh, to explain the name of the title, and you find this out pretty early on, inhabits the body of Lavinia, this upper class woman who's not narrating the story. It's third person, but you're always it's third person perspective, always from the perspective of Lavinia. So, but yeah, it follows Lavinia going with this Aztec spirit kind of in her head, like influencing her actions, although that's not really like a main. It's more of just a touch of magical realism, I suppose. But yeah, it's said the central story is really Lavinia engaging with this. She becomes interested in this leftist movement and is trying to negotiate her, identities as a female in this movement. She has some people will be turned off by that phrasing, and I don't. I'm not a big person with like I read books for identity or whatever, so I don't want to make that a focus. But it is definitely an important focus of this book. To, she's she she's always aware of kind of the fact that she's a woman in scenarios where women aren't as accepted in society, which is, understandable and realistic. Uh, I already mentioned that the ending was phenomenal, so I do just want to say that I had a bit of a difficult journey through the book this past week because I don't know if I just wasn't like quite in the mood, but it was hard to get into, even though I kind of related to how, um, as she's working as an architect, she is seeing how even though she's following her dreams and everything, she's still part of like this corrupt system of the government, like displacing people to build a shopping mall or whatever. And she's participating in those types of projects and feeling uncomfortable about it. And I could relate to that with my experiences working abroad and feeling uncomfortable with, I worked in a similar setting in a similar type of job, in another country, in a foreign country, and experienced some similar things, so I could relate to it, and and that got me into it. But then I got a little frustrated, kind of, with the plotting pace in the novel. It's really a lot about her relationships and with other people, and like her kind of getting complicated over the fact that she can't participate directly in the movement, even though her boyfriend, the architect, is like really involved in it, and she kind of feels it's because she's a woman and they won't let her be involved in certain things. And also because she's upper class, they don't trust her. So she kind of feels separated from society by her position as an upper class woman. And that sort of navel gazing can get a little tiring at times. And I don't want to make this come off as like it tried my patience a little bit. Like, I felt it could have been shorter. I thought it could have been done more to the point. Not that I felt that there was something inherently wrong with showing that perspective, because it was, I do think it's true to her experiences, and I think it's true to real life, from the perspective of a woman, an upper class woman participating in a movement that's supposed to be fighting for the lower classes. There's a lot of contradictions in that are interesting and need to be talked about and discussed. It just dragged a bit, kind of like my description of it. My apologies as well for that. So I've also been doing a little writing this past week, and that's helped develop my appreciation and be a little bit less critical. I mean, I'm critical. I'm not judging. It's just preferences. Maybe some people like kind of the more, want this stuff a little bit more drawn out. I personally could have thought it could have been shortened, but uh, so yeah, there were some parts of the book where I was feeling a little anxious to, like, yeah, get on with it, get on with it a bit. But yeah, I think the ending really delivered in a way that even would make me want to reread this book, paying more close attention to parts that I thought weren't important, if that makes sense. Because that's what's great when an ending really delivers. And if the ending hadn't delivered in the way that satisfied me, I would tell you, and I would not be giving a positive review of this book like I am. It made me, but like right now, even still, it's making me think about a lot of things, because I mentioned, like, this last week, I've just been struggling with some things more on like an, I don't know, more like a society level. Like, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed by like where society's going and like social media. And I started reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations just in the background, and uh, looking to that kind of for some solace and some spiritual, not, maybe, I don't know if guidance is the right word, but just kind of to help ground me a little bit. So um, that it was a really odd juxtaposition with a book that's about being an idealist trying to change society, because Marcus Aurelius Meditations is more for a person who's in a society like the Roman Empire that's so big and so expansive that you, as like a person, there's no movement, there's no one person that can really change it. So you kind of just accept your individual lot in life and work with that and work within the system because it's just so big. But there's an amazing quote at the end of this novel that really shows, and again, without spoiling anything, just hearing this out of context is not going to spoil it. Um, it's yeah, I hope I can I even bookmarked it. This is terrible. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So Faguas, which is the fictional country, and I'm just translating this myself from Spanish to English. Uh, Faguas was not a great city where all was decided beforehand, and no life meant anything greater. Here, there was nothing fitting the great existential doubts. It was easy to take a side. In this, in such a small country where everything had to be done yet, you couldn't evade the responsibility with arguments developed in long philosophic essays. So that's my translation. In Spanish, it's Faguas no era una gran urbe donde todo estaba decidido de antemano y ninguna vida significaba mayor cosa. Aquí no había cabida para las grandes dudas existenciales. Era fácil tomar partido. En este, su pequeño país de plastilina, donde todo estaba todavía por hacerse, no se podía evadir la responsabilidad con argumentos arduamente desarrollados en largos ensayos filosóficos. So it's like that really put in perspective to me, like when you talk about like the left and the right, and like, can you really try to change humanity's nature for the better? And like when do you get to a point where like violence is the option to try to like, make society better? When is a dictatorship? When is there no peaceful remediation of a dictatorship if you want to make things better? The difference between like a huge country and a small country, it's like the issues of a small, not yet fully developed country, it's like your back is kind of against the wall. Either you're directly participating in that corruption. It's like a village almost, it's not a big expansive thing, and you can't, and you're not kind of like engaging in this existential philosophical way. You're engaging in a very direct, immediate way with the decisions that are being made. In a way, in a small country like that, the communities are so small, and like everyone knows everyone. In I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but this is just kind of a different perspective for me, being from the United States, and even having lived abroad in Peru. I mean, Peru is still a fairly large country, both population wise and size. But it's a little bit closer to what this is talking about, where it's like when you're not in the United States and you're not in some great empire, right? You are just more directly confronted with what is your reality, and more directly confronted with the fact that it's not systems that are moving the society, it's people. And so if you have bad people in charge, it's going to get bad. Now, none of this is me saying that like I think that a communist or left-wing ideology is the best, but I mean, really, whether in the name of freedom or in the name of equality, and I think almost everyone, we can come together around the idea of equality of opportunity, if not equality of outcome. No matter what, you're going to have this discourse of making people's lives better. And that's not necessarily going to result in better leaders, as the past has shown. But do we give up the fight? No, because, and again, the way this book ends illustrates the whole contradiction so well. And like, there's elements too of like the lost innocence of children who have to experience this kind of uh, violence, but there's really no escaping it, and there's no. It's either you accept that a few people in the country are doing whatever they want and getting away with anything, everything, and not providing for the rest of the people. Um, it's and it's not. I think the book does a good job of showing how, or being a good counterpoint to sometimes people will say, well, all rebellions are fueled by resentment, or all uh, philosophies of equality are fueled by resentment. I think this book does a good job of showing that that's not necessarily the case, even though there are contradictions. A lot of people are motivated by love, um, and not only that, want. I think more so than that, they may not be satisfied with their own lives in some way, which doesn't mean resentment, but they may be looking for an ideal to kind of fill that void, and it even illustrates. I don't know if the author even realized she wrote this into the book, but there's parts that show how like an ideology can really become a person's sense of identity, even once they've like and this can be a sinister thing as well as, maybe a positive thing for some people. Religion does the same thing. It fills a void, right? um, and in that way, like political ideologies and religions can sometimes function the same way. You can see that play out. So yeah, this book is really thought provoking. I think you can, just by what's coming out of me after reading it, you can get the sense of that. And you may be, wondering where do I fall politically, since of the way I talk about it. I I feel like in this book confronts me with the fact that, like, you know what, you really do have to talk about it and say something. So I've previously identified myself as a radical centrist, which means I don't yeah, I always am looking for like what's in between, and I don't trust extreme ideologies really of any sort, and generally don't think I could ever, even though in the past I've had some far more extreme views on some things. I would never go back to that. I don't. We'll never say never, right? But I don't think I would ever go back to that. I don't. I like to stay in the center of things, and I like to hear other sides, and I prefer at this point leaders who are boring and get the job done rather than loud and rousing the people, and great speeches and things like that. Um, it's Some would say you have to be inspirational to get things done. I disagree. Um, it depends on, it all depends on the system, but I think where I'm really going with that is feeling like, um, I just and I recognize that there's a lot of problems with that way of thinking of mine, and centrists, of course, are the punching bag for everybody because we don't commit to anything, and we don't have any hard lines, and that comes off as like flaky and not serious. But I think it's humble if there's something good to be said for it, and it's recognizing the limits of what we can know for certain is going to have good results. Decisions have to be made, and sometimes extreme policies have to be taken to produce good results. I'm aware of that too. So I don't think there's any easy answers for that stuff, and there's a reason I'm not in politics. But if anyone was curious, that's my approach. And I certainly don't judge, for example, people who have decided to participate in fighting against dictators in their own country, or fighting against unjust systems, and I don't judge them as just resentful or what have you. But I am still critical of whether those movements have the ability to produce good results, because you have to look at history too and not be blind to the fact that well-meaning ideologies can lead to bad people in power too. So yeah, wow, just this was a great time reading The Inhabited Woman, especially alongside the contrasting meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and getting, I guess, a little bit of insight into the differences of like uh, Latin American, Central American politics, and not just politics, but seeing how politics are directly related to like our, you can't, you really can't avoid wrestling with it at some point in your life. And I sympathize, for example, with some of the characters in this book that don't want to take sides, and so do the quote unquote rebels. Um, and I mean, they're not portrayed as weak, but they're definitely portrayed of having all their own problems anyway, and um, don't get me wrong, the book has quite a lot, in my opinion, flaws, and it's not like from a literary style point of view anything revolutionary or um, what have you, but the way it ends just really makes me want to reread it and see a little bit more what's behind it. I love some of the literary references in it. Jules Verne is our main character Lavinia's kind of favorite childhood author, and Jules Verne is contrasted with some other things she's read, like books that have kind of taken her into more pastoral, rational direction, but then Jules Verne is kind of like what awakened the adventure in her, the sort of adventurous spirit, perhaps, that the spirit of this Aztec woman that inhabits her latches onto, and which that is really interesting in itself. The whole mythology of the indigenous people being integrated into this book, and there's some problems with that too, because I think sometimes I don't want to write off the fact that the Europeans were like ruthless colonizers in the Americas, because they obviously were, both intentionally and unintentionally, because of like the diseases, for example, that killed so many people. But I also think that there is a tendency to like over mythologize the native people and think like their way of life was more peaceful, or like whatever, uh, or one thing or the other. But it's much more complicated, I guess I'm trying to say, than some people make it out to be. And obviously the Spanish, both in Peru and in Mexico, Central America, all those took great advantage of the fact that both the Inca and Aztec empires had enemies, and were not well liked by big portions of the other American Indian, uh, American native groups. So all that is wrapped up in it, and I think the part about the indigenous woman inhabiting Lavinia is a little bit over mythologized for my taste, but I see where it fits in, and I don't know if the book would be better without it. Hard to say. Uh, like I said, I felt it could have used with a little cutting down, probably, just like my videos. But it's like I always say, the more time I spend editing, the less time I spend reading. So, next video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know your thoughts and comment. Subscribe if you like. Uh, yeah, thanks for following this journey. Whatever you get I hope you get something out of it. I certainly am getting a lot out of it. Treating it kind of like a vlog, and giving you my immediate reaction to these books. So we'll continue with our next country as soon as I've got it done, and yeah, we'll keep it up.